And with this, I can take over. As Sabine has rightly said, I mean, security is at the moment the issue that is on everybody's mind. And of course, it has many different aspects. Security has a component from history, geography, where you are placed in the world, it shapes your outlook, and we thought that it might be a good idea to enlarge the picture a little bit and focus on how European security looks from the perspective of the far north, reaching out security issues in the Arctic region, into the Baltic Sea, and so forth. And of course, neighborhood is a special issue in the whole discussion about security. And beyond that, I would say that the world and the whole world order that we know is going through so many fundamental changes. And one is tempted almost to quote President Xi of China, who said the world is changing in a way it has never experienced before. Yeah? And that's quite true. And it's not only that the whole parameters in a way of peaceful coexistence, peaceful relations among states have changed through the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We experience an hourly escalating tension situation in the Middle East. We have so many other conflicts that have serious security implications, even if they are a little bit further removed. Think of Sudan, for instance, which is in a horrible civil war. And we have the escalation of tensions in the whole Pacific region, with the tensions growing between China and the Philippines. And so there are security issues that are really of a worldwide implication. And we are very fortunate that we have with us Ambassador Vaskunlahti, Finnish ambassador to Austria since 2 years.
1 year.
Since 1 year. And an experienced Finnish diplomat who has worked, I would say, in all different continents of the globe, from Australia to Latin America. And I will not enumerate all the different stations that you have been going through. Just say that Ambassador Vaskunlahti was ambassador in India, in Bangladesh, in Turkey, and is now, was Director General for Russia and Eastern Europe in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, was Deputy Permanent Representative at the EU. So there's a lot of vast experience that are coming together here, which are relevant for our discussion. And we are very lucky to have you here and to share that you are. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. We also have on the podium Mr. Mühlberger, an Austrian, who has been working for a number of years in Finland. Mr. Mühlberger is an independent consultant on especially security issues concerning the Middle East, but also on issues like mediation and peace building. And he has been working for a number of years as a fellow with the Finnish Institute for International Affairs, and is now attached to the so-called CMI, the mediation organization of the Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation. And I would say, before I give you the floor, that Martti Ahtisaari is a very well-known personality here in Austria. He has been very helpful to Austria in a number of very difficult occasions. And I myself met him for the first time when he was chairing the negotiations for Namibia. He was president of the UN Council for Namibia and was chairing the negotiations for independence of the statehood of Namibia. So Martti Ahtisaari is a very well-known person here, and you are fortunate to work in his foundation, I would say, or for his foundation. So I would like to ask the ambassador, first of all, to give us a bit of an overview of the recent developments in Finland and how sort of the Finnish thinking on security issues has developed over the recent past and where we are standing now.
Thank you. No, thank you, Eva, Wolfgang, Sabine. Ladies and gentlemen, very nice to be here tonight. Before I arrive where we are today, I think I have to go through a bit of history so that you all know where we come from and why we are where we are at the moment. And I also brought along a map that shows you where Finland is and that shows you who our neighbors are. This will take 10 minutes, so relax. It's not as long as you think. So, Finland joined the NATO in April 2023, and the accession into the alliance took less than 14 months. But a long history preceded that. But the most important factor was Russian invasion in Ukraine, its sovereign neighbor, in February 2022. The following morning, following the Russian aggression or invasion, there was a press conference, and our then President Niinistö stated, Russia has massively expanded hostilities in Ukraine, and now the mask has come off. Only the cold face of war is visible. Finland shares a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia, and that's the longest external Schengen border. And that's also the longest NATO border nowadays that NATO has with Russia. And Finland gained its independence from Russia in 1917. We fought 2 wars against the Soviet Union. We lost some territory, but we did not lose our independence or we did not lose our sovereignty. Throughout the years, we maintained a cordial relationship with our neighbor. And we expanded our room for maneuver step by step. Partnership for Peace with the NATO started in 1994. We joined the European Union in 1995, so did Austria and Sweden at the same time. And in 1995, when we joined the European Union, we ceased to be neutral. We became non-aligned. And by the way, in 1992, we decided to acquire 64 Hornet fighters from the United States. And at the time, we had the first female Minister of Defense in Finland, Mrs. Elisabeth Rehn. I think her name still bears a good bell as well. In 2014, Finland became one of the NATO's enhanced cooperation partners. And at the same time, we were developing a diverse set of bilateral, trilateral, and minilateral relationships with Sweden and other key NATO member states of the time. And in due course, all our military capabilities became compatible with the NATO standards. There were so-called modernization packages from early 1990s until recently. But applying the NATO membership was not the talk of the town. There was latent support for NATO members, latent support around 20% to join the organization. But what is very important, bear in mind, for Finland, a permanent determining factor has always been our geographical position. I mentioned the border, and thus we have always maintained a very strong national defense and reserve forces. Reserve forces are 870,000 people, and conscription army, roughly 22,000 youngsters, both young women and men, do the military service. Finland is also a coastal country, as you can see. 90% of our export and import goes through the Baltic Sea. we are an Arctic state with huge unpopulated areas in the north. So 2/3 of Finnish population lives in 1/3 of Finland, and the whole population is 5.5 million. So we are a small, big nation at the same time. So that means our size, our location, it means that we depend on the others. And we want to depend on friends, not on foes. When we look at our neighbor, Russia, the Russian behavior started changing already quite a long time ago. The tone of voice became more aggressive, and so did the Russian operations. I think we all remember autumn 2008, that was Georgia, Crimea 2014, and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk in Ukraine were taken under Russian control at the time. Then there was speech by President Putin in December 2021. The content was quite chilling. Russia wants to restrict the right of other nations in its immediate neighborhood, look at the map, make their independent security policy choices. There were also demands for NATO and the USA to refrain from further NATO enlargement. And that stirred the atmosphere in Finland, almost like volcano erupting. Then there was Russia's full-scale attack on Ukraine on 24th of February 2022. And that offensive laid bare Russian intentions. And that proved to be the tipping point for Finland and also for Sweden. The Russian invasion shocked our nation, also our identity. And it was soon realized that non-alignment would not be enough. And the threat perceptions of the foreign policy makers also fundamentally changed. And as we stated then, as we still state today, our security environment changed fundamentally. I mentioned earlier that there had been latent support for the NATO membership, 20% opinion polls from time to time. But now, in February 22, a swift change in public opinion. In December 21, 24% of the Finnish population said yes, let's join the NATO. In February 22, 50% of the Finns said yes, let's join the NATO. In May, the figure was 74%. The option to apply for NATO membership had been in the government programs for some time, at least 3 previous governments I can think of. But the option had not been used. There was no need, we thought. But during winter, early spring 2022, it became obvious that an application letter would be presented. Then the debating society began. Everybody debated and discussed. Be it media, be it on the streets, be it, family dinners, everybody, be it the parliament. White papers were written to the parliament, and parliament debated. Prime Minister and President. In Finland, foreign policy is conducted in cooperation between the President and the government. Both came out saying, we are very positively inclined towards applying for the NATO membership. We will listen to public opinion, we will listen to the parliament. Very soon, and in particular after these white papers had been presented and debated by the parliament, it turned out that there was a broad support across the party lines for Finland's membership in the NATO. And on the 17th of May, there was a vote whether to send in an application letter or not. We have 200 members in the parliament, and 188 voted yes. So that was a pretty clear outcome. And the application letter was handed over the following day in Brussels together with Sweden. And then, as I said earlier, Finland became member in April 23. So that was a rather swift process. And
just with a quick question. Yeah. So it was a bipartisan issue.
Absolutely.
All the parties agreed. I mean, with such a majority.
Yeah, such a majority.
It's really across the board.
Across the board. Across the board. Few individual voices, voting no, but otherwise, even in the Left Alliance, some of the members voted for applying the membership. And I think on the 18th of May, President Niinistö, our then president, made his last phone call to President Putin, saying, you know, it's only polite to inform your neighbor of your decision. That was it. Very short telephone conversation. It was all made in public. And that's where we are now. And the way we see it that the Finnish membership of the NATO strengthens our own position and it also strengthens the alliance. And as an ally, Finland is contributing to NATO's collective deterrence and defense. But Finland is also a security provider. We don't only use security, but we provide security. And the NATO membership also glues us where we want to be, a member of the Western Alliance, sharing the Western democratic values. And I would say that the NATO membership also marked a historic change in the instruments of Finnish security policy. I'm sure you have heard of Finlandization, neutrality, being cordial, being careful. These were all the instruments we had in our use to make sure that we get along with the neighbor. At the same time, we keep our independence and our sovereignty and secure our own territory. And the NATO membership also means that we can even further deepen our relationship with our partners. One example is a defense cooperation agreement that we have with the United States, signed in December last year already, ratified in the Finnish parliament unanimously. Nobody was against that. Cooperation with Sweden has increased in particular, as you know, I mean, a diverse network of agreements, and also with other Nordic NATO partners and the Baltic partners. And just in the end, very simply, I would like to say that every country seems to maximize its own security. And Finland's values, interests and goals have not changed. The main goals of the Finnish foreign security policy are to safeguard our independence and territorial integrity, to avoid becoming involved in a military conflict, and to improve the security and well-being of the people of Finland. And at the same time, it will be 30 years, or next year, of the Finnish accession to the European Union, which was also a big step, for us going to the direction where we want to be. And I always remember when we had referendum in Finland, we very rarely have, that was the second referendum in the independent Finnish history, when we voted whether to join the European Union or not. And already at the time, when we voted in 1994, for me, it was a security policy choice, even though it was not so much spoken in public. But for me, it was a very clear reason to vote yes, because I wanted to vote us away from that grey zone somewhere up there in the north, and to make it very clear where we belong, and we belong to the European Union. It's our sort of a most important framework of Western values, a framework for our foreign policy, etc. So this is where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was most interesting. Mr. Mühlberger, from your experience in the 6 years that you have been working with the Finnish Institute for International Affairs, I'm sure that you have followed these developments, threat perception, how to define security issues and so on in more depth, and perhaps you could also comment on that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, for having me here today. Maybe just one point, the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, where I used to work, independent think tank that is actually connected to the parliament of Finland. It used to have a certain pro-NATO image, which is of course not a question now anymore. In my view, the reason was that there were some very vocal proponents of NATO membership already at the time. However, what is nice about FIA, and this unfortunately does not exist in Austria, it's not an institute that is driven by party politics, but by issues. So it's really about analyzing, for instance, Finnish foreign policy. And this brings us now to the topic. Just a brief note on history also. I think it's also important to look back at the Second World War and how it developed between Soviet Union and Finland to understand the choice of NATO membership. I think you cannot understand the rationale for going the last bit of a long process of increasingly closer involvement with NATO structures without NATO membership. The reason is that during the two phases of warfare between Soviet Union and Finland, Finland lost considerable territory, Karelia, northern Karelia, and also Petsamo corridor, which was linking Finland to the Arctic at the time. So now it's a non-riparian, but still considering itself Arctic country. And this left a sort of a bitter legacy, and also the understanding that Finland needs to be self-reliant. And this philosophy of self-reliance, of determination in Finland, has resulted in a very, very strong conventional military capabilities. And this is what Finland brings to NATO. Finland, in that sense, as you were saying, Nina, is definitely a security provider for NATO structures altogether, but first and foremost, still for itself. So you have to understand that Finland is seeking, well, basically nuclear umbrella from NATO, so that it cannot be coerced basically by atomic means by Russia. So just to close this gap in its security perception, and it's a quite essential gap that needed to be closed. And the whole war in Ukraine, yeah, it certainly functioned as a catalyst, and it gave the Finns the impression that they really need to get prepared beyond their already very high levels of preparedness of what they call, Finland has an interesting concept of comprehensive security, which might ring a bell also for experts of security in Austria. But the comprehensive security concept in Finland also includes an important commercial or economic component, meaning that there is a lot of dual-use producing companies that are also supported by the state and that are useful in peacetime, but that can also be useful in wartime when things get really tough. This is part of the comprehensive security package of how Finland looks at it. And interestingly, right now, these dual-use companies are the strongest growing element of the defense sector in Finland, which is growing very strongly. And it's also basically a means to attract capital, because if it were not dual use but only military production, the law would not allow such an amount of investment flows to these companies. Finns are very pragmatic and have this sense of building deterrence by conventional means. And the choice to move closer to NATO was basically a very, an incremental process. So it was really just the last step. Applying for NATO membership was somehow, in my view, a process coming full circle. It was a process that started already with Partnership for Peace, and then from 1994 onwards, and especially after the annexation of Crimea until 2020, during these 6 years, there was really a very strong rapprochement by all means. But what is important to understand is that Finland is part of, and you were referring to that, bilateral relationship with Sweden is key also for defense purposes. But it's not only about Sweden and how their military and defense capabilities can complement each other, because the Swedes are stronger in the naval component, etc. And Finland also has a naval component, but it's mostly for the shoreline, etc. What is also important is that it's beyond bilateral relationship. It's really what is called NORDEFCO, so it's Nordic Defense Cooperation. So these are 5 countries: Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. And they have been cooperating very strongly and also incrementally closer over the past, basically, I would say, I think it's since 2008 or since 2009 that this structure has been really put in place and gained serious traction. So there is a lot of interoperability already at this level. And in addition to that, Finland has become part of the Joint Expeditionary Force, which is a UK-based military entity. And the Joint Expeditionary Force would be a sort of a first responder if Russia would still now attack Finland, even though it's a NATO member. And I'm not talking about hybrid, but I'm talking about kinetic. It would be a first responder because there's already quite well integrated structure in place. And this military construct does work within NATO, but if NATO decision-making processes are too slow, it can also work outside NATO. So this gives an additional security to Finland because this is already, and it is also linking to the US via UK, the whole security realm. So from that perspective, what will be now important in the future for Finnish, well, the threat perception for Finland is clear. It's the eastern border with Russia that needs to be permeated, basically. So there's currently 400 million euro project going on in Karelia to reinforce the border fences, and it's also against hybrid intervention by Russia because of pushing immigrants, for instance, to border posts. So it's a quite considerable investment for a relatively short stretch of the long border, but this needs to be done. It's also signaling, of course, towards the neighbor, so Finland, how Finland sees itself within NATO is interesting because Finland is still in a learning process now, how it will negotiate and position itself within NATO, because there's always competition over means also within the NATO structure, because there's more than 30 member countries. However, geostrategically speaking, it is clear that the epicenter of NATO in Europe has moved north. And this is important because it raises a number of issues how Finland and the other Nordic countries who are NATO members will now basically, how their relationship to the southern or NATO members in the European Union or in Europe, Spain, Portugal, etc., Italy, France, of course, also, who have completely different threat perceptions that are more focused on North Africa, terrorism, instability. So there's going to be a negotiation process. And yeah, just to close here my brief expose, Finland sees itself along 4 core lines. Finland considers itself a Baltic country or a Baltic Sea country.
Baltic Sea country.
Yeah, I added the sea just on time. Hence, very close future cooperation with Estonia is certainly one of the options, especially on the maritime component. Finland also considers itself as an Arctic country, so it wants to participate and to contribute to NATO Arctic security. But the reason is also that in case of need, it wants to have reinforcements coming through northern routes in northern Norway, etc. If need be. So this is also an important element. Finland also considers itself a very basically an island. The latest comments also from the highest general in Finland are that Finland is also physically an island. It's not directly connected by any transport means, trains, etc. to the continent. So it's very dislodged from even Sweden or from Estonia. So it's a peripheral country. And that's the reason also why it seeks to enhance deterrence and defense by becoming a NATO member. So these are the key issues I think that I wanted to point out. And yes, and of course, point number 4 to complete the picture. Finland considers itself a frontline country with Russia because of the border.
And the irony of the history is that the one and only land railway connection we had was to St. Petersburg and Moscow. And now, no more trains. Good trains from time to time, but no more passenger traffic, and that's it. Yes, and you can walk to Sweden if you go up to the north.
Yeah.
But I think that's a very good point what you said, and what I also said, that yes, we basically are an island, and if you sort of would turn the map around, if you would turn the map to the left, you would see it even better. The island impact.
I was reading the document of the Finnish government. The assessment of security and so which you kindly sent me. And there the government outlines the various components to Finnish security. And there's NATO membership, of course, in the first place and the most important. But second, and equally important, membership in the European Union. And participation and contribution to the development of a European defense structure, in a way. And then thirdly, it emphasizes the importance of a stable global world order through multilateral diplomacy, through the international organizations, and that Finland is sort of committed to make a very serious contribution to the maintenance of such a rule-based, law-based global system. These are points which Austria would subscribe as well. Yeah, the only difference is we have never taken. We've had a lot of discussion, but we've never taken the step to really go for membership in the Western Alliance. But of course, the arguments which you outlined are very interesting, also in line of the Austrian debate, which is ongoing. Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, you basically said it yourself, Eva. The document Eva was referring to is something that is prepared for the foreign ministry, Ministry of Defense, etc., and then for the government on security and foreign policy. You know, the government we have now took office 1 year ago, and this time it took 1 year to prepare the foreign and security policy paper, and that sort of gives the outline and the framework for the next 4 years, for the next 3 years to come. Normally the government sit for 4 years. And the interesting thing is when you look at these papers in the longer run, maybe Wolfgang can even add, because I'm sure he has looked at them at the very long run, the main content does not really change. So there is certain, a big amount of continuity in Finnish foreign policy. The instruments that we use change, have changed in the course of the times, and now the latest one, and also something that is very clear to me is that from neutral, you become non-aligned, then you become aligned, and that's due to the fact that the world around, the neighborhood, and the global scene has changed to a certain extent that we had to make these decisions, and they were not making sort of lightheartedly, but it took time, and but at the same time we were preparing the next steps, just in case something happens, and I have to say it quite openly, if Russia had not invaded Ukraine the way it did, that was like the final straw. That made us to take the steps and apply for the membership. So in a way, it was Putin's own doing what has now happened. But we are sort of very, very pleased with our decision. And yes, stable global order, rules-based multilateral system based on international law and respecting the international convention agreements, it's a priority number one for us. We are a small country, and small countries need rules-based multilateral world where everybody has a say. And of course, for a small country like Finland, it's fundamental to belong to something bigger, and that something bigger for us is the membership in the European Union. That really is the first frame of reference when we talk about values, when we talk about foreign policy, when we talk about economy, and as I said, this package puts us very clearly where we want to be and where we want to remain as well. Of course, one can say that hey, the world has changed. We need to discuss, whether some institutions should be reformed, like the UN. Now the UN General Assembly Week is going on. The whole leadership of the Finnish leadership of the Finnish politicians are there, the president, the foreign minister, a couple of other ministers. And I think our president gave a speech where he was indicating some ideas how to reform the UN. And well, that is a process that has been going on for quite a while, a process that will continue for quite many years to come. But at least, that he is acknowledging, or we are acknowledging the fact that certain institutions cannot remain as they are, that they have to sort of respond to the changes of the times. When we think of Africa, when we think of South and Latin American countries, Asia, the inverted commas global South, I mean, they need the place that they are entitled to, and therefore some of the institutions are somewhat lagging behind. But at the same time, keeping in mind, the rule of law and multilateralism. It's not Chinese multilateralism, multilateralism, or Russian multilateralism, but it's something we have to base on existing concept of agreements and frameworks.
Excuse me, you have no mineral resources, I think, just the fear from Russia. Norway has a lot of oil, so you're in between. What will happen? You have a lot of trees, no?
Yeah, 80% of Finland is covered by forest.
Does the state give a lot of money to have a lot of NATO power to see, hey, look Russia, we have a lot of weapons?
No, we have always we have always sort of had very strong defense force, and we happen to have the largest land artillery in Europe. And like Wolfgang stated, I stated, we fought 2 wars against Soviet Union. Finland, Helsinki was one of the few capitals that was not occupied during the Second World War. We lost maybe, as you said, Karelia, maybe 1/3 of the territory. So we know our neighbor.
better to play ice hockey, tennis?
No, that was not enough, apparently. That was not enough. And when you have a neighbor who behaves in the way as Russia has, if you have a neighbor whose president is saying, I tell you what your security policy choice should be, that's not the neighbor we can discuss with. We make our own foreign policy and security policy choices. If you threaten in words, and a couple of weeks later you threaten with arms, then I think you have to draw your conclusions from that. And we also saw what happened already there's a famous speech in Munich in 2007, if we want to go way back. And then there was Georgia in 2008, Crimea, etc. So with hindsight, maybe some of the decisions that were made now should have taken earlier on, but it's useless to go to that. Yes, 80% of Finland is covered by forest, but we also have minerals. We have uranium, we have lithium, and many more, but much more is being prospected. But that, I think, is a side issue. We have a neighbor who does not seem to respect sovereignty or territorial integrity of its neighbors. And therefore, we are where we are.
Before we open the floor, just one remark. You made a reference to the fact that the attack on Ukraine was sort of the last step in the development.
Yeah.
And we had a development from 2000 onwards, where the international stance, the political stance of Putin got step by step more aggressive and more abrasive. And also, I mean, what Finland experienced was a lot of submarine activity in the Baltic Sea. There was cyber attacks. There was hybrid aggression already. So it culminated finally in the military aggression and the military onslaught against Ukraine, but there was a development leading up to it.
Yes. I mean, there is a long history behind it. I lived in Moscow myself between 2000 and 2004, and when I moved to Moscow in 2000, the country I left in 2004 was already different than the country I had moved in 2000, because in the early 2000s, I think all of us, believed that, hey, this country will change and it will become like us. That was a mistake. It was changing, but it never became like us. They might share the same values on the paper, but not in practice. And I was able to witness it myself, how sort of a strong man is sort of starting to tighten the screw. And that we talk about, 20 years ago. And this is where we are at the moment. And of course, you sort of try to find the ways and means to sort of cope with certain things. And you look at your toolbox, this is what we can use today, that we can use today, but hey, these tools now are too small and we need something bigger. And I don't mean sort of physical tools, but sort of a mental tools and how to react to what is done to you. And of course, at the moment, Russia is extremely nasty. There's something going on all the time, in a hybrid way. Wolfgang mentioned, this, the instrumentalized migration, trying to push sort of illegal immigrants, so-called asylum seekers, across the border. Same thing it has been doing towards Belarus, towards Latvia and Lithuania. GSP, the planes cannot land because somehow the landing system are being disturbed. But we just find the ways. We don't make too much fuss about that because we don't want to sort of give anybody the joy to say that our society is being disturbed. I mean, we are pretty resilient to deal with these issues. So it didn't come to us as a surprise.
There's a very interesting article in the last issue of The Economist where they compare the politics of Russia and the politics of China. And so the final result of the reasoning is then that politics in Russia is at the moment the politics of the wrecking ball. Yeah, they are wrecking everything. The whole attacking everything is there. China moves more tentatively, trying to reform and reorganize the international system in their own image, you know, but do it with sort of more gloved hands. Yeah. If it's all right with you, I would like to involve the audience at the moment. I see letters.